Hello everybody and welcome back. This week we are going to do something a little bit differently and we're going to rebuild a planer. So this planer is a 1950s Delta Rockwell 22-101. Fairly popular little machine online. I found it for a pretty good deal, a really good deal, but it needed some serious cleaning and I took a chance on it, and so we're going to go through that process. Now, from the start, you're going to see some photos of the disassembly. So from the back of my truck into the shop. And I will say that this was a rather large project compared to the ones I've done in the past. Even the larger machines, there was just so much more hardware that the degreasing and derusting process was substantially longer than normal. So far it's turning out pretty good. This is going to be a two-part video, two-part series. And then what we'll do after is I'll do another video for planer setup. So setting the rollers accurately and the knives, as well as the pressure bar and the feed roller. So we'll do all of those. We'll set all of those in a separate video because that crosses over into other machine setup. So does the derusting process, and for that reason I've brought out the main tools that I've used. Now this was important. This is grease, NLGI number 2. It's suitable for high speed and low speed and stationary applications. So it's probably your middle of the pack on greases. But I packed thrust bearings with this, and threads for machine bolts and whatnot. So this will work. That's what I've used, and evaporust. So this is fantastic for getting rust off parts. I took the grease off first, I used TSP powder, solvable, to get grease off of the parts as I took them out. And before I put them in the evaporust, it makes the evaporust last a lot longer because eventually it just gets really dirty and gross and turns black, and then it loses its ability to be reused. So the degreaser first. This machine had a substantial amount of grease on it and rust. I'm not too sure why, but it did. So those were important, the consumables there. Now if you're going to attempt a project like this, you're going to run into a time where you need pin punches. They're not very expensive, but they're very handy, and to get out roll pins. And if you do it carefully, you can reuse the roll pins. So do it carefully. Snap ring pliers. Now, I'm not going to recommend these ones, the adjustable ones, because I found them frustrating and not a very good tool. But you will need some to get apart the cutter blocks and the gears and such. So this is actually the only machine I have that required these, except for the fence on my old Woodworking, but it is something to keep in mind you may run into. And I should have had roll pins a long time ago. But the other thing is a gear puller. I've used these on every machine. Really handy for getting off bearings and stuff. So these tools are not that expensive. Of course, you're going to need a hammer or some of these, but if you have a shop, you probably have one of those. So pretty basic tools, but they're very handy for doing this kind of thing. So hope you liked the video, and we'll see you in the next one. Hello everybody and welcome. So in front of me I have a disassembled Rockwell Delta 22-101 thickness planer. This is a machine I just recently picked up and decided it was worthy of being torn apart, cleaned up, and brought back to life. So this will replace my, this is an RC33. Pretty sure, I don't know what my model number is. This is also a Delta Rockwell machine, just 1980s. This is 50s. The difference between that machine and this machine, for me primarily, is the table rises and falls versus the head of the planer with the motor, and that's why I'm wanting to make the switch. So I'm going to walk through the different parts we have here. This video won't show much of the disassembly as much as it will be the reassembly, because it was a bit chaotic getting to this point. I couldn't lift it out of my truck, so I had to disassemble it in the bed of the truck. And I was just able to now get everything organized in order to continue forward. So over here, I have a bunch of hardware that's being cleaned up. We'll go through that later. And right now we'll go through the separate parts. So this is the bed of the planer, the work surface, the table, whatever you'd like to call it. This was very rusty, and you'll see a photo of that in the back of my truck. I've only spent a very little amount of time sanding it at this point. One of the only problems I'm having with the disassembly of this machine is some of these screws. They're just stuck. I have to get a torch and try and heat it at this point. I got some of them out, but I do want to get these guides off, or whatever they're called, so that I can properly sand the entire table versus just in between, just to keep everything as flat as possible. The table is surprisingly flat, so that's a good sign, and something I'm very happy about. So I know it'll work out. So that's the table bed, and this is quite heavy. Taking it apart, this was one of the challenges. It goes together a little strange. This is the first time I've done a planer, so I've noticed that there's a lot more hardware involved in a planer than in my other machines. Okay, so I have to sit down in order to get my face into the shot because I can't go back far enough with the camera. But this is the base of the planer. Now it's not the base that goes on the floor. It's sort of the top half of the machine. It's actually cast iron. The base that goes on the floor is mostly steel, except for the supports. Those are cast. So underneath here is all of the table lift hardware. So it's got a shaft with some gears that attach to the studs that have gears to lift the table that extend out to the handle that pops out on that side. So that's all of the table lift hardware. So I've got each portion, each shaft assembly essentially, with all of its respective hardware and parts in its own Ziploc bag. Now that is because there's a lot to keep track of, and although they're pretty simple enough to find the parts and put them back together, there's a lot to mix up here. So I also can't degrease and put them in evaporust at the exact same time, all of this. So I'm splitting them up. Now there's a lot of grease on this machine. I'm not too sure why. Usually that means it protects everything from the rust, but there's also a lot of rust on this machine. So part of me wonders if it was left outside at some point. I don't know. It will clean up okay. It's just taking a little longer. So that is the cast base of the planer. Okay, so here we get into the housings for the gears. So in this Ziploc bag, we have all the gear parts, which look pretty good. Now, there is some concern of this machine online about the brass worm gear. To me, it looks okay. So, you know, I'm not a professional on gear mechanics, but to me, it looks okay. Now, when I saw the machine, it was way out of adjustment, and we'll get into that over here, but I think it can be all put together and adjusted appropriately to work for my needs for a long time. So we're going to see when that goes back together, but I think it's okay. I'm also very light on my machines, so I'm not too worried. If it works and I get it to work, I'm pretty confident in it. So here's the housing for all of the gear parts. It goes onto the side of this housing where the spindles attach into here and the rollers attach into here. So you fill this up with oil and the gears pick it up and move it. So I'm going to be putting new gaskets on the side. So I have to clean off the old ones still, but I did degrease most of this. Probably done again, but I did. I haven't done the insides. I do want to do that because every time you touch something, your hand just goes black with this. So I don't like that. Now, I'm not going to paint this machine at this time. Eventually I will. But the degreasing is taking so long and the rust is going to take longer that it needs bearings. I just want to get it working. I didn't expect this project, so I really just want to get it working and decide that I like it, and then replace the planer that I have. Once I do that, then when I have the time, I'll go back through and paint it. So this here is the what do you call it? It engages the gears, it engages all the rollers. So basically a shifter. This belongs over here with the table adjusting hardware. So that is the gears and the housing for the gears. Okay, so underneath the gears is this one of my favorite parts of this machine. Honestly, it's the switch. I have all the parts here. I've pulled the switch apart and looked at it and put most of it back together, at least the brass casing back together. I took, I haven't done that one yet. I took this off, which had been gotten oil leaked on it. A little bit of it from me from taking off the housing, but most of it appears to at some point have had a leak in the gasket and got into the switch. So we're going to put new gaskets on it and make sure that doesn't happen again. But the beautiful part about this is that the switch hides behind this casting, and it goes right into the design of the machine. It's beautiful. So I really like that. I really like that. And I know the machine works. I know the switch works. Now, there has some weird stuff going on here. I don't know what that's about, but something there's melted. I don't know if maybe somebody didn't have wire strippers, and so they used a lighter to melt off the coating around it to get to this solid copper. Or for some reason that melted, and we're gonna have to figure that one out. So that's the switch. The rollers here, that's all for the hood. The rollers here really need some work. So they're really dirty, and because of all the grease, I can't tell exactly what's rust, but there is rust on there. And the bearings are completely shot. At least they sounded like it. Yeah, they're completely they're grinding. So actually, it sounds better than it did when it was in the machine. We're gonna see. I mean, I haven't pulled it apart yet, but I'm probably gonna replace those bearings and put in sealed bearings. I like to do that because it makes less mess, and you don't really have to maintain them as much. So, like when I pulled apart my old joiner, you can just tell with the open, both of them, you can tell with the open bearings that it just splashes grease around the machine. So I'd prefer sealed bearings, and I don't run them long enough or hard enough to be too worried about heat, especially with new bearings. They're pretty good. So one thing I did notice in reading the manual was the knives that were in here were ground way past the minimum recommended. So, you know, I don't know if somebody, maybe that's probably a large reason of why the machine ran the way it did, and pretty rough, and seemed like everything was out of adjustment. Because it's just not gonna, it's probably not gonna work properly that way. So it needs new knives, which is okay. I kind of expected that. I kind of expect that with every machine I buy. Yeah, so new knives. Now, they're all metal rollers. They're not rubber rollers. So I like that. A lot of planers, problems you see with replacing planers and not having replacement parts is rubber rollers, because they get damaged and then you can't replace them, or they're hard to find. These are all metal, so I'll take the rust and grease off of them, and you know, we'll see how it works. So that is all the rollers. So new bearings in the cutter head. Okay, and here we have the other side of the housing. Oh, sorry. This is actually, I got them sideways. So this houses the pulley from the motor. This one houses the gears. So this one doesn't have much inside of it. It's just space for the pulley to the motor, and this one is for the gears because it has some plates in here. Now this is the hood that covers the cutter block, at least one part of it. I didn't have any more room on the table for the other part, but this is beautiful. This is a nice casting. Now I'm missing the badges, both of them. So I don't know the serial number. I don't know why they're missing. I can see a little broken piece off here. Given the way this machine looks like it's been treated, I suspect that they just broke. And then someone just pulled them off. I've ruined one myself, so it's really not that hard to do. I tried to clean one. I can't remember what I used. It was, maybe it was acetone. I tried to wipe some grease off it, and I took like all the paint off the badge. It was just, they don't survive very well. So, I'm not overly concerned about that. I can buy replacements if I want to, but they're oddly expensive online, so I don't think I will. At least not right now. Maybe when I paint it. These are the only other screws that I have not been able to remove. They're stuck, so I do have to pick up a torch and try and torch them out. Actually, these ones have been tough as well. I tried to do that in the machine though, not out of it. So what I would like to do is I would like to replace some of these. I don't really like the flathead screws. I don't see a problem with going with grub screws for most of these. Cap screws, not grub screws. But we'll see when we get to there. It depends on where I get the bearings from. If I get the bearings from McMaster Car, then I will order some hardware. When I paint this machine, I will go through some hardware. Now I've noticed the hardware difference, the quality difference between this machine and my other wad converter screens. You know, not bad, but still not quite as impressive. The hardware has taken a bit more damage than I've ever seen on my other machines. But I know where to find nice replacements, and that's McMaster-Carr. So when I paint the machine, I might spend some money doing so. Now, it does get expensive quick. If you spend, you know, $2 on a really nice washer, if you have 30 washers, it gets, you know, and that's just the washers, it gets pretty expensive. So it's worth it when you paint the machine. I don't think it's, right now I want to focus on all the bearings and degreasing and the gears and anything functional. I want to put any funds that I have into what's functional. So paint is the last thing I'm going to do. Now, I'm getting better with cleaning up and repairing these machines, each one I do, and I can already tell this is probably going to be the best one. So I'm going to, when I do paint it, I'm going to move into brush paint, and I'm going to give that a try, metal brush paint, rather than the spray cans. I don't find the spray cans give me a very desirable finish. I also don't like black anymore, really. It stays looking dirty all the time, no matter, and I clean this place a lot, so I don't like that. So we're gonna switch color and see how it goes. I'm still gonna pull it apart. I might change my mind by the end of the disassembly process, but yeah. So that is the disassembled planer. Before we go into some other videos, I will add in here now that this jar is all derusted hardware. This is hardware that looks pretty good at this point. I know that this is the piece that bolts. This is the bolt that holds the table to its bracket. So there's 4 of these. They cleaned up pretty well. Most of it cleaned up pretty well. There's just some that didn't, and you know, strangely, those are actually cap screws that suffered. So I'm looking for, like, one thing I haven't been able to find yet when looking for new hardware is the same quality steel. I don't know what kind of steel this is. And I'm not a machinist, so, you know, this isn't something that I can just look at and go, oh, that's this type of steel, or this grade of steel. And I cannot find, for the life of me, what grade Woodworking Bergspring uses. So if you know, please leave a comment, because I would really like to know. But all I know is whenever I go to a hardware store or online, I'm having a really hard time finding a bolt that looks exactly like this. So I'm still searching, and when I do find them, I will eventually. I will be replacing every odd bolt on every one of these machines with this quality steel, because I can put this in evaporust when it's coated in rust for years and it comes out looking brand new. That's not the same with every bolt. I can tell by the ones that have been replaced on my bandsaw that there's 2 or 3. There was 2 or 3. I've replaced them, but with stainless. But they just did not hold up compared to the other bolts. And you know, these aren't stainless, but, or maybe they are, and it's just what they look like when they get old, really old. I don't know. But that is something that I really look for. Because the washers that Woodworking Bergspring uses too are impeccable quality, right? So that, and I'm going to find out the proper lubricant to put on the threads and the proper amount when they go back in so they never get stuck again. That with sealed bearings and new gaskets, there should be no grease or oil spill out on this machine. So we've got the pillars on at this point, and I've mounted the housing for the gears. That's gonna have to come back off again. I need to buy some gaskets for it, but it gets it off the floor. Now, the most difficult part of this rebuild, I would say, or the most frustrating part, was getting these bolts out. They were rusted, stuck in there. So I would like to replace these bolts, and I've already found them online. I'm trying to keep this the cost low on this right now. Replacing these would just be cosmetic at this point, because I've got grease in there. I took the rust off them. They're not going to get stuck again. So I'll do that at some point, probably when I paint the machine. Now, when I paint this machine, I'm going to have to get this machine sandblasted. It just needs to be. It was really greasy and oily, and inside, I do want to paint the inside too. I don't want to paint the machine and then not paint the inside of all the housings. And putting it into a big chemical cleaner is not as practical. I think it's sandblasting. So when I do that, I'm going to get this sandblasted, and at that time I'll probably get the table resurfaced as well. I've gotten the table saw top resurfaced. It cost me about $200. So if this cost me $100, I'd be more than $100. I'd be pretty surprised. So that's something that I will do then. Now this table's pretty flat, so I'm pretty happy with it. I did sand it with 600 grit paper or 400 grit paper for quite a while. I could go further, but I think I've gotten any sharp ridges off, any rust off. So I think that's where it's going to stay for now. But I'm pretty happy with it overall. I still see the potential of it when it gets resurfaced and I paint the machine, but I'm pretty happy with it for now. So I've installed the table jibs in here. It takes up the slack in between the table and the pillars. I put grease in there against this side. I will grease this as well. And I put grease on the setting bolts as well. So it does move. I haven't spent time adjusting it yet. But it's pretty smooth, so I'm really happy with it. So why do I like this machine, and why did I choose to purchase it? I like it because the table moves. It's a stationary machine. The table moves, not the top of the motor, not the head of the machine, with the motor and the cutter block. It works, but I much prefer the table moving. Now that is a Delta Rockwell, or just a Delta. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what year they separated, if they did, but that's a good planer. I like that planer. But I did want the moving table. So the motor's underneath here. I like that. It's a big motor. It's about it's 3 horsepower. That one's 2. And those were the main reasons for the switch. It's almost the same footprint. It has a bit extra wide, extra length to it because of the table. That's okay. I like that. Other than that, it's it's about the same. So for comparison on these types of tools, I mean, why do I always go with old tools? Largely the build quality. If I had a budget of $600 and I went out to get a planer at a store, I could only get a lunchbox planer. They're not as powerful as that or as good, and this is nowhere near, or that is nowhere near the quality of this. So I paid $125 for this. It looked like a piece of junk when I bought it. It needed work, and so I chose to work rather than buy one that needed it. But the positive side of that is a lot of people might think that that's just a ton of work to do. I don't have the time for that. But when something goes wrong, I've never even used this machine, and I understand it fully. When something needs to be adjusted, it's not going to be grease and rust sticking that's preventing me from getting that perfect adjustment. I understand how it works. All the adjustments, I know what the bolts look like. So if something isn't tightening down properly, is it a tough thread, right? A worn out thread. So it's really beneficial to take these machines apart. In fact, every time I do it, I'm surprised how much better it works, but how much quicker I understand the machine. So this is the first time I've done a planer, and I'm really glad I'm doing it. So hopefully you've been able to tell, judging from some photos and some videos, that this is cleaned up incredibly well. Everything under here is really clean. There's one problem that I had, and that was getting this bronze screw onto the thread. The top thread is damaged on the stud, and it was causing problems getting it back on. It must have been from trying to put the table back on and damaging the top thread. How to clean that up, I'm not too sure, but I got it on and it works, so that's okay. I will have to find a way to adjust this table, because if that's not perfect, well, I assume the table needs to be perfect with the cutter block. If it's not, something's going to be off. So there will be an adjustment in that. So I'm going to continue on with the assembly process. We're going to put in the rollers, the gears, and then I'll stop and talk about the cutter block a little bit, because there's some things I want to say about that. But other than that, what I'll do is we're going to get this machine assembled, and then in another video I will go through the setup, dialing everything in from the rollers, the gears, to actually using the machine. Because I think I'm already at about an hour, so we'll shorten it up, or we'll split that up a little bit, because that can actually be used as reference to other tools for other people. So setting up a planer. So that's what we're going to do, and enjoy the rest of the video. So we have to call it there for this video. There is a few things that I need to accomplish before we go forward, and one of those things is I need new knives on this cutter block, and we're going to go into that in the next video, and the challenges that are associated with this cutter block. Other than that, I need a couple special hardware that I can't get at a local hardware store. So I have to order those from somewhere. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go back into a woodworking video next week, and then we're going to finish this machine off 2 weeks from today. So after that, the next week will likely be a machine setup video, or we'll go back to woodworking again, and we'll just rotate until it's done. But so far, I'm very happy with how it's turning out. It's clean. Everything is very clean and running smoothly, especially the table. So that's the video we just finished off at. The table is going to set properly and run properly, and that's really important. And it's fairly flat, so I don't have much complaints on this machine yet. The biggest complaint I have at this point is going to be the aesthetic properties of it. I couldn't get to painting it. It needs to be sandblasted, and I just can't get into that right now. So that will be left for a future date. And honestly, that's like all of my machines. I prefer to do them all the same so they match. I know I don't have the same brand machine for everything. I've got 4 Wad conversions, 2 Davis & Wells, a Boyce Crane, and a Delta Rockwell. So, yeah. So, I'd like to paint them all the same color because I've taken them all apart, but I haven't figured out that perfect color yet. I'm not a big fan of machine gray. Anyways, that's this video. So we'll see you in the next one.